Yeah, so we'll do a quick lesson today. We had a few people talking in Discord. There were actually a lot of interesting discussions on the Beginner Go Discord this week, and there's always so many different things that we could talk about, and I always want to be careful not to get too far out of my depth, right? Um, and keep things palatable as much as we can. One of the things that came up a lot was a discussion of making a base and what exactly does that mean. So when we did our lesson, and by the way, you can check the history of our lessons on the YouTube channel. I think I've got a playlist specifically for like quick lessons or something. But we did a video on moving from 9 by 9 to 19 by 19, and in that video we talked about a few different weapons that you can bring, and even up to my skill level, a lot of times things that happen in 19 by 19 Go are determined by, it's just a combination of all these different factors, right? But some of them are like, if you're really familiar with a particular Joseki and someone else is not, you can get an advantage in that particular area. If you're really familiar with this other trick that you know and they are not, then you'll do well. If you make a move, you're like, I think this is the right move to just hop in over here. That feels like the right move, but you don't know what to do with it, but they're really familiar with it, then you can have a disadvantage in that area, right? So, I don't like to think of Go as just a combination of tricks. But that said, you can still equip yourself. You can still have some specialized local knowledge points in your tool belt, and that will help you in your games. So one of the things I think we should talk about is what is a base, and like what is it for? Are there ways to I don't know. Let's just discuss some the base, and let's discuss a little bit of shape too. There was some talk about shape in the Discord, and a few videos were linked. Nick Sabicki has a really good video on it. Dasan, I don't know how to say that name, Dasan, Dsaun, also has a lecture on shape. So there's some useful stuff there. And as I say in here all the time, I don't have anything to say in the Beginner Go stream that hasn't already been said better by much more skilled teachers than myself, right? But we're building a community, and this is a place where we can interact, we can talk live, and so it's fine. but feel free to check those out if you want like a more structured, higher level, higher skill level talk about those things. I don't mean that it's meant for higher skill players. I just meant that the teacher is higher skill. Like Nick Sabicki's super good. Oh, nice. Triple Gote said that there's a shape online. There's a book online that you can find called Shape Up. TK, you said a couple of people stayed after the Shark stream and we played 3 by 13 boards. Yeah, that's exciting. So cool. So let's slap a little opening on the board. This is Orthodox opening for black. There are all sorts of different openings that we can choose. This is not the most common thing these days, but it's still certainly playable. Let's say this, and then black attacks this stone, and now, especially in the early game, Tanuki is almost always an option. But let's say we want to respond locally. There are a couple things that we can think about. We can think about running, like with a one-space jump to the center. You said you also have the original SGF. Not sure how to upload it to you. Okay, cool. You could upload the SGF in the Discord if you want. Could be a good place. Maybe in like the resources discussion or something. But yeah, that'd be cool. So if we want to respond locally, there's usually a few things that we can do. We can run. We could consider attacking the stone that's attacking us, or just make a base. And it's important to note that there's overlap there. I mentioned as two separate things, making a base and attacking the stone that's attacking us. But when we make a base, we're also attacking anything that's around us, because whenever we make a strong group, then we can attack from that strong group. And we can imagine, pretending this is a white stone, you can imagine sort of jumping from a strong group to attack other things, but also like this base makes this invasion stronger. It makes it more dangerous, because when our opponent responds, since we're stronger over here, we don't have to worry as much about babysitting two things at once. Now, I'm not saying you should jump in right now, but just to sort of thematically talk about the ways that when you build strength, you can attack directly from it, but you can also attack near it. You can create a weak group near a strong group and sort of push toward the strong group. It's useful. And, I want to talk about this too, right? We say all these things, and I remember being a beginner and hearing those things and just not understanding, right? Because when you're imagining it, you're like, you might think that you need to be able to read the sequence that gets you there. You're like, okay, let's, for example, let's pretend just white is just super strong. I don't know. Okay, let's say this white group is here, and we're considering this attack. And when I say having a strong group here helps this attack, you might imagine that you need to know what happens when you do that attack in order to make it. You need to know the variations. Okay, if he covers, then I need to do this. So I can jump in Sansan. I can one space jump, and then he one space jumps. You don't need to know that, or at least, I don't know. It's tricky, right? It depends on skill level. Just talking at the beginner level, I think it's really good to correctly identify thematically correct moves and just play them. And if you're with a similarly skilled opponent, you both might wander off the path that is the ideal track, but probably in a similar way, and you're starting in an advantageous position if you started with the right move. Similarly, this could be one of those things like I mentioned at the start. Let's say your opponent is just, they always play the orthodox opening. They've done this extension a million times. They've seen this invasion a million times. And so for that particular invasion, they're really experienced in it, and you're just wandering in. They'll have an advantage there. And there is some chance that even if you're making a good move, you'll still lose the fight because, your opponent just outreads you. They're more familiar there. Things like that. But even if that happens, right, that's beginner go mantra number 2. Let's make mistakes. It's fine. It'll make an interesting review when especially if you can find a stronger player who can identify, you started with a good enough move, but it deteriorated, and this is why. And then you can learn from that, and you can start building your expertise in that area. It's really useful. But okay, all that aside, let's talk about the base. And I want to keep these lessons pretty quick, so we can get to our tournament. Okay. So in general in Go, when we talk about a base, if it has to be something, it's going to be the 3-space extension on the third line, a 2-space extension on the third line. This is like the quintessential base. There are other bases, though. So for example, this is also a sort of base. This is sort of a base. There are lots of different things that we can do. You said, okay, the SGF. Thanks, TK. There are lots of things that we can do. The general idea is usually we're talking about spreading some stones out, either close to the border, like a side, or close to a corner, which is also a border. You can't really make a base in the open board. This is just a line, but the same 2 stones on the border do start making a base because these exert so much, they work well with the border, right? So the reason you're making a base, the reason you're making a base is for a few reasons. It just establishes the presence of that group. It gives them a footing, if that helps. There is potential for white to make eye shape here. Let's say later, white gets to do this, and then, let's say white does this, and black goes down, and then, I don't know. Okay, just to illustrate, right? There's some potential for some eye shape here. I'm not necessarily saying that these moves are good, but so just to illustrate that there's some potential there. There's also potential for white to run. Let's say, black starts making a really big shape over here. Well, if you get to hop out and just sort of live in the middle of it, That's great. That's going to eat away so many points. And as I said before, if this gets strong, it also gives you sort of an ability to create weak groups in the area and invade. So it can be pretty useful. Hey, what's up, Move361? That's not a line, that's a cut. Did I misspeak or something? Sorry. Gamma Go 1, good to see you. I don't think I've seen you in chat before. Welcome. So yeah, so just talk about that, and so this is, like I said, kind of the quintessential, but in general, you just want to spread some stones out. You know, when we talk about shape, we're usually talking about volume or surface area, right? Sort of the rounder a shape is, the healthier it is, if we talk about the stones which enclose the shape. And so when you put these stones close to the edge, even though there aren't any white stones on the borders, since they're on the third line, they're close enough to the border that we can start to consider that part of the shape. Now, let's say, for example, for some reason, I don't know, black is like this. There are ways to strip the base from white. Especially if there's a black stone one space away here and a black stone one space here, let's make it black's turn. Something like this can strip the base, and it can also split the stones. So like if white tries to block, black can come up and things start getting kind of scary over here. If white just keeps their stones connected, black can come under, and suddenly there's not really room for eyes. But even that is okay. Black does pay a penalty for doing that. It's usually going to basically be Gote, and you give white the opportunity to run out into the middle. And so, you know, this kind of thing is flexible. And so usually black won't try to strip that until, you know, maybe later there's some fighting over here and black ends up strong on the outside. You know, I'm just making up some moves. If black is like this, then suddenly attacking this group is huge, because you can just straight up kill it, because you can strip the base, so there's no eyes there, and then there's nowhere to run, really. It would be difficult. And again, I'm not saying that because I'm reading all of the cuts and jumps. I'm just saying that, in general, black has kind of a net around this group. Probably it won't be able to run. 2 space jump equals cut. I'm not sure I'm picking up what you're laying down there, Gamma. Maybe we can talk about that more. Feel free to expound in the chat. Maybe it's just a joke that's like, whew, you know. Okay. So anyway, that's what we talk about when we're talking about base. And just to show some follow-ups, right? So as the attacker, if you're attacking a base, you can play one of these points to damage it. And as the defender, you know, if you start feeling a little claustrophobic, you know, if you know, black has some stones around here, this little one space jump from one of the arms is generally considered a good way to strengthen that particular base. And okay, you know, and it's the same for any, you know, we showed there are some like diagonal things you could call a base. There are some things that are kind of spread out for a base. Just in general, if you want to strengthen something like that, you can jump out a little bit, and in general, that will be stronger than it was. It's fine. You know, we don't have to think about it, especially at the beginner level. We don't have to think about all the nitty-gritty things that could happen. Just know that jump up, start expanding your volume. The ideal the ideal shape is technically a sphere. In Go, it would be, you know, more like a square, right? So the less rectangular. TK, you have a question? Please shoot. While you're typing your question, I want to go back and illustrate. Would a one-space jump at L4 be better? You're talking about, like, let's say white has made a base and then black did something else. Oops. Let's use this tool. Black did something else. You're saying this to threaten O3? This is kind of a it's a good discussion. So I would say that this does threaten O3 more, but what this can do is give your opponent an excuse to strengthen and fix that weakness, right? So, this is a game of complete information. Sometimes you can do something and your opponent won't realize that what you're actually doing is affecting this fight over here, and it's going to combine, right? But something like this is usually pretty obvious. Usually your opponent will be like, that makes this this look scary. So just as an example, let's say your opponent responds in this way. So you've gotten to strengthen your group a little bit, but you've given a lot of strength to your opponent in this particular case. So sure, sometimes we can consider a slightly thicker, a slightly stronger move to threaten other invasions, but we should be careful not to give our opponent an excuse to fix their weaknesses, unless it's like a handicap game and you're trying to do that. Sometimes we do that. Yeah. And Neko, so you mentioned that that's a good question. Neko, do you have any extra thoughts on that? I'd love to hear. I assume that that's what you were thinking as well. But nice. Yeah. So just some thoughts there. You said Gamma said L3 M4. Sure. Yeah. I was just doing that one thing as an example, but sure. Like L3, and then black can stand, and now black has this 3-space extension. We've talked about this a few times on stream as well, right? This is a very natural feeling extension in general, right? When we build a wall that's vertical on the board, by vertical I mean orthogonal to the edge. Okay, so it could be this way or it could be this way. It could be any direction. I just mean, perpendicular to the edge that it's close to. We usually want to extend away from that wall, and the proper extension, and this isn't always true, but just as a sort of a rule of thumb to see like what would feel natural, is many spaces away as the wall is high plus 1. So this is a 2-high wall. So 1, 2, 3 space extension. This makes a very natural feeling wall. So yeah, so when white does this, black could also consider this, and that feels natural. The Sansan is open. There's lots of little nitty-gritties we can consider. Okay, but just to illustrate. Okay, we don't like the word orthogonal. Okay, perpendicular, does that make sense? Tomato, potato. And the white diagonal shape is weird. Sure. But okay. So we talked about that. So the other thing I want to show is this 1-space jump. Now, I don't want to talk about it specifically with this board state necessarily, but just to illustrate that it's also a really common option when you have a third line stone that gets pressured, right? And so usually the way that we attack stones is, something like M3, right? We don't usually attach straight to a stone, although there are sometimes reasons to do it. Usually we just play near it, just to make it worried. So the 1-space jump to the center gives you some options, right? Especially if the center is open. Now, if black is super strong in the area, okay, then the 1-space jump might not help us. But usually that is not the case. And what I want to look at is what happens when we cut that 1-space jump. So just to talk about some shapes real quick. And I'm just beating a dead horse. There's so much literature on this, right? The Kosumi, the diagonal, is not cuttable, right? If black tries to play, white can play on the other side. If black tries to play here, white can play on the other side. So you can effectively call these connected in most cases. Sometimes things will result in a Atari or whatever, but in general, open board, those are connected. Similarly, a 1-space jump from a 2-high wall is fully connected. If black tries to disconnect, we can Atari and then fix. Right? This is just an example of how we can keep those stones. It's not always necessarily the right thing to do this exactly, but just to show, this is connected. There's no way to disconnect. But then we can start wandering away from that, right? So when we look at the knight's move, this can be disconnected. It's difficult, but it can be done. So for example, black, white, black, and then white has to decide. In this case, white could actually stay connected with a ladder. So here's the ladder. We've talked about this before. So yeah, actually in this case, black can't disconnect quite that way. The this way wouldn't work either way. So actually, this particular knight's move cannot be disconnected right now, but it has some weaknesses. Okay, but then there's the one space jump. We talk about the one space jump all the time. It's so good. Do one space jumps. One space jump toward the center. Whoever does the more one space, the most one space jumps toward the center wins the game. And I mean, a lot of times you'll see, even in professional games, you'll see like two like lines of stones just wander up that way. But it's annoying because they're cuttable. It's possible to cut one space jumps. So I just want to show what happens, right? Let's just look at it real quick, because you should always consider this. Sometimes it's good to cut a one space jump. Sometimes. Usually it's not. And so let's just look real quick. Doot, doot, doot. And then in this case, white can consider a few things. Let's say, white does this. We can see it's cuttable, right? Or let's say white does this. It's cuttable. And similarly, we could consider tiger's mouths, or we could consider this. Actually, this, I think, almost protects both cuts. Technically, they're both ladders, but for example, if we do the ladder on this side, then this cut works. There can be some complicated things, but in general, we don't want to do this wedge directly, just because white gets a lot stronger. White establishes a strong position with that two-space jump, that one-space jump. And when we wedge directly, especially, so like right now we're showing it with M3 already there. If M3 is not there, it's even worse to try and cut it. It's very difficult. So just to illustrate, like, have these things in your mind when you make that. When you make that wedge, think about the natural progression of what will happen there, and then ask, is it really better or not? It can be pretty tricky. So one thing that we'll often do, and again, I'm not saying on this particular board that it's necessary, is we'll just peep. When we peep, we threaten to do that cut. So then, if white fixes, sometimes this makes white heavy. In this case, it's not necessarily heavy, but but if it is helpful for black to have this stone for whatever reason on the board, then that can be a freebie. You can just play there and say, hey, I'm threatening to disconnect your group, because if white does something else, now this is severe. Now when white blocks, that's not an Atari, so black can feel free to take cuts. So this is much more dangerous. So there's a proverb, something like, even a fool connects a peep, something like that. So it's usually the right move. Okay. Anyway, that's our super basic lecture, not even a lecture, super basic talk on some shape and some bases, and because we've seen a lot of things like this in our reviews this week. Let's see, can you talk about the difference between heavy and strong, please? Thanks, Neko. So there's two words actually that I still mess up sometimes, and y'all in chat correct me. I use heavy and over-concentrated to mean the same thing, but they don't mean the same thing, apparently. So over-concentrated is when you're using too many stones to take too few points. Heavy is a similar idea. You've got lots of stones clustered together, but it seems like it's more used for like survival and I-shape kind of thing. Okay, let's see. Neko says heavy equals no territory but too many stones. Okay, and you're differentiating strong. Yeah. Hey, what's Oko no Michiyaki. Oko no Michiyaki. Welcome. You're officially a nerd. Thank you for the follow. Feel free to say hi in chat. Let us know how much you play and stuff. So strong, in fact, heavy and strong are I would say are more like opposites, where it's not like two words that mean similar things. It's usually opposite things. So when we talk about this base, this is strong. I mean, it's not extremely strong, but it's good, and it's not heavy because we're spread out and we're being efficient. So our stones are working together because they're both in the neighborhood, they're both on the third line, so they're close to the border. There's a lot that they can do, so we could call that some strength, but they're not heavy because they're not close together, right? As opposed to like this, this is not strong. This is over concentrated or heavy. I don't know. Okay, but it's one of those. Your stones are too close together. They're not doing enough. There's not enough potential to do things. Okay, hey, little try. Thank you. Heavy stones might get bullied. Strong stones won't. Yeah, that's good. Hi. You said hi, beginner. Haven't been playing much recently, but enjoyed your stream before. Okay, great. Well, glad you're here. So if white were to do this, and then let's say black gets to do this, white is not strong. White is just too clustered together and is very likely to be attacked and likely to have to run or even die. Yeah, so I love this too, right? This is what's so fun about building a community like this, right? So like Neko is a little bit stronger than me, a few stones stronger at least, and so he's participating in chat, and I really appreciate that, Neko. And then Little Try comes in, who I think is probably a few stones stronger than Neko. I'm not sure though. I not like I've seen them play, but and so then Neko's like, hey, here's what I have to offer. Oh, Little Try comes in. Neko's like, hey, correct me if I'm wrong. So that's how this always is, right? And that's I try to let me just type my little thing in chat real quick. Right, so I try to say that all the time, where I realize I'm not like a lot of the other Twitch streamers who's like a high down level player who can give a lot of advice. I'm low level. I just try to give some thematic advice to beginners. I can tell you what I think, what I see, and hopefully try to elevate 15Q, 20Q up closer to my level. But then as you start getting close to my level, definitely you need better teachers than me to continue pulling along, right? Misty, hey, what's up? Okay, anyway, just some thoughts. So it's 12:30. Let's do our weekly 9x9